police officers has triggered sweeping changes against ethnic discrimination and profiling in the United States of America, in the United Kingdom, and other parts of the world. Policing laws are being reviewed by Congress in the United States. Colonial slaveholder status being pulled down and removed in Britain. In Africa, Nigeria, June 12 has become a symbol of political struggle against ethnic domination and facilitating national cohesion. How will these developments change the social political paradigm around the world? With an election coming up in the US, a growing awakening against systemic racism in the United Kingdom, and a June 12 that has become a rallying symbol against inequality, injustice, and ethnic bigotry. Welcome to Democratic License. I am Tunde Alabi. My guest that will look at how the world can defeat racial discrimination in national and international politics are a member of the British Parliament who is joining us from the Palace of Westminster in London, Meg Ilya, MP for Hackney South in London. And in the studio with me is a member of the Nigerian Parliament, the Nigerian House of Representatives, Honorable Bamdele Salam. And when we come back from this short break, we will be discussing how we, the world, can actually defeat racial discrimination. After this break, I'll bring in my guest.
Coronavirus, also known as COVID-19,
is our current reality.
Our nation is on lockdown.
No school,
No group worship,
no group gatherings,
No parties.
No more funerals.
no weddings.
no social life matters anymore.
Stay safe. Wash your hands regularly.
Use alcohol-based sanitizer.
Maintain social distancing.
Stay at home and monitor your favorite TV and radio stations for updates, accurate and safety information.
Fake news.
Fake news
Fake news. Fake news.
can cause more deaths than coronavirus.
Do not share unverified information, especially on social media. Be charitable.
Let us collectively fight this common enemy, COVID-19.
The government cannot do it alone.
Let us support by providing and
Spreading correct news and information.
This message
This message
This message
this message
is from Abuja Broadcast Station managers.
All right, welcome back to the studio. I have my guest joining us on the program today, all the way from London, Meg Ilya, who is the MP for Hackney South in London and a member of the British Parliament. Meg, thank you for joining us on the program. Good afternoon, Meg.
Always a pleasure, Tunde. Always a pleasure.
It's good to see you again. We look at what is happening around the world, the sweeping changes in terms of anti-racial discrimination protests. Let me ask you, as I put this to you, is it not time for British Parliament to come up with legislative acts that can check systemic racial discrimination in Britain?
Well, yes, in some areas, the law may need to change, but it's not just about the law. And I think that's what's really important about this, and that we need to channel this energy and anger about systemic inequalities in our system. So, for example, when a law is passed or a policy is proposed, there's supposed to be something called an impact assessment to look at which groups might be particularly badly affected by it. That's not been done very well for quite some time now. And there's a lot of historic inequalities that because there are not enough people of different backgrounds, and particularly black backgrounds, at the decision-making tables in parts of government and parts of the British system, they're just not even properly considered in the first place. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done. And one of the key things is that we need to have far more diversity of representation in many of the bodies that make decisions about all our lives in order for them to actually consider and make sure they're really bringing to the table the impact on black people's lives in particular.
Right. Are you really concerned as an MP representing one of the most populous black Asian ethnic community in Britain that how black people are being treated? There are quite a lot of Nigerians in your constituency.
Yes.
You've come across a whole lot of them every day that they come to your surgery. Are you really concerned, and what steps do you think you as an MP will be taking in the coming days, in the coming week, month, to ensure the safety and, of course, the protection of the black ethnic and Nigeria in your constituency?
Well, some of it will be things I've already been doing for some time. So I remember when I was first elected as an MP 15 years ago, I was quite shocked at how many West Africans, including Nigerians, were in jobs much lower than their qualification level. So I looked into that. Also the discrimination, because if someone's got an African accent or an African name, there were definitely issues there about how people were treated. So I talk about that a lot. I try and push for change on that a lot. But whatever you legislate for, you still got to educate and press and sanction organisations if they're not behaving fairly to all groups. Make sure that there's an awareness, first of all, that if they then don't treat everybody fairly, that there are inbuilt discriminations, that they work to improve that. And if they don't do that, that there are severe sanctions. So, for example, a few years ago, the Runnymede Trust, which is a well-known anti-racist think tank here in the UK, published some very clear evidence. They did a study. They got people to apply for jobs, and they got people to apply with a name like mine, and on the same CV, someone with an African name, someone with different names that indicated different ethnicities. And interestingly, and perhaps sadly, not surprisingly, the person with the white British sounding name did better in getting job interviews, even with the same qualifications. So we know these things exist, but what sanctions have happened since then?
Yes.
To challenge companies, public sector bodies, all organisations about how they deal with recruitment. Because if you get those inequalities in at that stage, it takes a long time to change the system. Because as I say, one of the things for me that's really important is that people stand up and get involved from a range of backgrounds. And I spent a lot of my time in Hackney encouraging people from different backgrounds, people who don't look like me, if you like, to get involved so that there are other voices at the table helping to make these decisions and challenge these discriminations.
Right. Thanks, Meg. Let me come to my guest in the studio. I also have joining me in the studio here a member of the Nigerian Parliament, the Nigerian House of Representatives, Honorable Bamidele Salam. Honorable Salam, thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you very much.
We have this protest sweeping across the world. In Nigeria, what steps are being taken by the Nigerian Parliament, either the House of Representatives or the Senate, to ensure that every ethnic region in the country is protected and they are not discriminated against either on the basis of their race, their religion, or their ethnicity?
Well, thank you very much. I want to align myself with the thought expressed by Meg that the issue of racial discrimination, and of course every other form of discrimination, it's way beyond the issue of legislation. It's way beyond the issue of laws. Take for example the United States of America, where the issue of George Floyd, which is the background to this discussion, happened. There's a 13th Amendment to the Constitution of that country which prohibited slavery. But since then, what we have had over the years, despite all international conventions, there's an international convention against racial discrimination and so many other laws, you still have this practice of people being discriminated against on account of their color, on account of their ethnicity, on account of their nationality. Now, what we need to do as a society is to make sure that these issues get to the front burner of our national discourse. And ensure that everyone who aspires into public office, into running institutions of government, have credentials that show them as people who will not tolerate discrimination on account of race, on account of ethnicity, on account of nationality, and also make them give firm commitment to the electorate at every point in time. Now, another aspect of it is to ensure that those who commit crimes of racial discrimination, because I regard it as crime. And in fact, the International Convention Against Racial Discrimination, which was adopted in 1969, January 1969, actually, defines racial discrimination as a form of crime, a crime against humanity. Ensure that those who commit such crime, who take actions or speak words to encourage discrimination, are made to face the law.
Yeah.
When there is a deterrent, when there is a punitive measure on whoever does it, serve as a deterrent. Now in Nigeria, the semblance of this that we can take has to do with the issue of discrimination on account of state of origin, or account of religion, or account of any other thing. Now, it is important for us to note that if, despite the fact that the Nigerian Constitution prohibits, discrimination of this form, it will not be honest of us to say they still do not happen. But we need to encourage people to speak out.
Yeah.
There should be equal opportunities for people who are, seeking for employment in the public service and the private sector, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race and their state. There should be equal opportunity. And where there's a breach of this opportunity that is guaranteed by the law, people should be able to speak out. When they speak out, we have institutions of government. Apart from the regular security agencies, we have the National Human Rights Commission. The National Human Rights Commission is also saddled with the responsibility of tackling issues like that, but when they take it up and they take them to court.
But when these are actually being perpetrated by people who are supposed to protect that institution, that becomes an issue. For instance, people in high places in government, when they have selective attitude towards particular region, particular people on the basis of faith, on the basis of where they've come from.
You're very correct, Tunde, and this is very worrying, because when we saddle people with the responsibility of managing the affairs of a country or of a society, they are expected, to lead by example. They are expected to be the final version, as it were, of the populace. And this is where the civic society has a lot of responsibility.
All right, let me put you on hold and let me go to Meg. I know Meg has a lot ahead of her today. Meg, this is my last question to you. You have a lot of Nigerian people in your constituency, a whole lot of them. Let me quickly inform you, Nigeria celebrates a democracy today, 12th of June, and there is a public holiday in Nigeria. In your assessment, how far do you think Nigeria has come in terms of its democratic principle, from what you have heard from your constituents and from what you read?
Well, there have been some well-run democratic elections, so that's a good start. But I think everybody would acknowledge that there's still a long way to go. And I think when so many people in Nigeria are living on less than $1 a day, it's for them, survival every day is a luxury, is something that they have to think about. And voting and thinking about holding their elected representatives to account in the way that I would expect to be in the UK is for many of them just a stretch too far when they're thinking about feeding their children. So I think that is one of the challenges for Nigeria as such a populous country, such challenges and such poverty, and of course the challenges with more recently in recent years with violence mean that there are a lot of people just struggling to survive. But it's actually, the same goes in my constituency. That a lot of the people who get engaged with politics have got their basic needs supported, and others get involved perhaps out of necessity, but it's not something that they have time to do when they're working 4 jobs over 7 days. That includes, some West Africans in Hackney who are working hard just to make ends meet and help their children get on in life. They don't always have the time to get engaged. So we've got to also, in all of this debate, make sure that we give a voice to the people who don't otherwise feel they've got time, energy, or the right to be at the table. And we need to make sure that if they can't use their voice themselves, that they are supported by those of us who are elected to speak for them.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you for joining us on the program today. Your last thought on this program and your message to your constituency who are watching this program in Britain and around the world.
Well, I can only do my job with your support. I can only know what the things that affect you in your life, the treatment you get, the mistreatment you get, or the inequality you face because of your race or colour or accent, if you tell me about it. So it is really important that you talk to me so that I can represent you. And I think one of the key things I try to do is to support people who don't look like me to one day succeed me. And I just would say that yesterday Diane Abbott celebrated her 33rd year as Britain's first ever black woman MP. But it took a decade, Tunde, for her to be joined by one other black woman. and then another 8 years for a third to join. We now have 65 Black and Asian and minority ethnic MPs in the British Parliament. That's about 10%, but it shows we can't be complacent. And Diane fought many battles and was a lone voice for a very long time. So it's important that we have those voices at the table, but those of us who are white are also listening and channeling the messages and concerns from communities that perhaps haven't got the same voice they should have.
Awesome, thank you. Meg Hillier, he's the member of British Parliament for Hackney South in London, and she was also a one-time chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Nigeria. Meg, thank you for joining us on the program today. Thank you, always a pleasure, Tunde. All right, thanks a lot. Let's go on this very short break. I have this report that we need to bring to you now. June 12, 1993. Was a watershed moment in the history of Nigerian politics. It was election day in Nigeria, and with the SDP candidate MKO Abiola coasting to victory, the result declaration was altered and the election was subsequently annulled. In 2019, after the re-election of President Buhari for his second time, Nigeria moved democracy to June 12. In this report, we take a brief look at the events surrounding June 12, and when we come back from that report, I still have my guest in the studio, Honorable Bamidele Salam. Let's
presidential election held on 12th June 1993, the first since the 1983 military coup. The elections were the outcome of a transitional process to civilian rule. Events leading up to Election Day included the lifting of the ban on political parties in May 1989. Several parties then submitted applications to the National Electoral Commission, but only 6 were deemed to meet the requirements. However, in October 1989, Babangida rejected the selected political parties submitted by the NEC for approval, accusing them of being ethnically and regionally polarized and riddled with factions. He went on to form 2 new parties in December 1989, the National Republican Convention with right-leaning politics and the Social Democratic Party with left-leaning politics. The new nomination process, supervised by the NEC, involved a knockout contest from the local to the national level using an open ballot system, also called Option A4. The nomination process resulted in the emergence of Bashir Tofa, a businessman from the north, and MKO Abiola, a multi-millionaire media mogul from the south, as presidential candidates for the NRC and SDP respectively. Tofa picked as vice president Sylvester Ugo, a Christian from the southeast, thereby creating a regional and religious balance. Abiola also went for regional balance, picking an ex-diplomat and former chairman of the party from the northeast, Babagana Kingibe, as his running mate. On 10th June, just 2 days before the election, the Association for a Better Nigeria, led by Chief Oton Zeribe, obtained a High Court injunction against the holding of the election.
All right, welcome back from that report. I still have my guest in the studio, Honorable Bamidele Salam. From that June 12, 1993, has anything changed in the polity of Nigeria, in our system, in our politics?
Well, thank you very much. Of course, there have been a lot of changes. The question will, however, be whether those changes have been for good or for bad. Unfortunately, many things have changed for bad. Very, very unfortunate. For example, you could see from the background of that report where we had the leading candidate, the man who was presumed to have won that election, Chief MKO Abiola, picked a Muslim from the northern part of the country and as his running mate. Yet, he garnered over 8 million votes to beat his rival, Abubakar Tofa. He even won in Kano State, which is the home state of Abubakar of Tofa. Now, today, you ask yourself, if that scenario is supposed to play out, what will be the implication on the candidate? If a candidate does not maintain the so-called religious balance, if a candidate, contest an election, is there a probability that he will even defeat his opponent in his own home state? In other words, the kind of democratic culture which appears to have permeated our system over the last 20 years has reduced the values we place on competence and ability to serve the people.
Who do we hold responsible for this? Where did they get it wrong?
Unfortunately, we cannot lay any blame outside of the leadership. The leadership is supposed to take a society from one level that is lower to a higher level. So if any society is underperforming in any area, the responsibility must be on the leadership. The kind of politics which today emphasizes tribe, emphasizes religion, emphasizes money. Abiola won that election not because he was a rich man. Yes, he was a very rich man, but the kind of bridges that he built across all divide of religion, of tribe, of class, and everything, sold him to the masses as a man who could drive the process of changing Nigeria for the better. So the blame for whatever degeneration that we have had today must be on the leadership. And let me say this too: the kind of fairness, the kind of openness that we had in the election of June 12, 1993. We ask ourselves, do we still have such today? I doubt. We had a more transparent electoral process. We had a more engaging electoral process. We had a situation where people went to campaign to listen to manifesto, to listen to candidates. Today you need to mobilize people with all manner of resources to come for campaign. They are not coming to the campaign to listen to you and to know what you are offering, but they are coming to the campaign most probably because you are of their political party, or because at the end of the day there's a bread and butter to take away. So those values that were getting entrenched into the subconscious of the average Nigerian voter that we no longer have are things that should be worrisome 20 years after democracy. And of course some things have improved. Yes, people are more conscious now of their rights. The fact that we even had democracy eventually in 1999 was because of the struggles that attended the annulment of that election in 1993. So these are some of the gains. But to say that things have generally improved in our electoral system and our consciousness and our attitude will be very, very wrong.
Awesome. When the background to this program today was the death of George Floyd in the United States, we had protests around the world, including in Nigeria. People protested because of his death. However, in Nigeria, we have people who have accused certain part of the country of ethnic cleansing. We have death killings every day in southern Kaduna. We have killings in Benue, in Plateau. How do we marry this when one person died somewhere and then several people are being killed in your country, and it does appear every single day appears to be normal? Very worrisome today. You are absolutely correct. I mean, think about it. A time there was in this same country when an Igbo man was the vice chancellor of the University of Ibadan. A Hausa man would be vice chancellor of a university in the eastern part of the country. A Yoruba man was vice chancellor in Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria. Now what has happened? That is the academic community, an academic environment where you will expect that even there will be little or no sense of division. What has happened today? You can hardly find a vice chancellor even appointed from outside of the state a university is domiciled. Now, I just took this as an example. Like you rightly said, in so many institutions, public institutions and whatever today, we have entrenched mediocrity. It should not be. I grew up in the north. I grew up in Sokoto. I have my memories of growing up there. But today, can I confidently take my children to Sokoto and go and build a house because of our time,
live there? What's
the way forward in the scenario, in this situation?
Well, the way forward is, number one, the leadership must have a change of attitude. We must believe that this is only that fortune has entrusted in our hand is to grow the country, to grow the people, and to entrench the best values that humanity should have. If leadership takes on that responsibility, I'm telling you, it will be very, very easier to take on those who are, who we are leading.
Honorable Amdele Salam, thank you for your time on the show today. We will certainly come back to look at this issue further. But for today, we need to rest it here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on the program. This is Alpha We Can Go on Democratic License. Next week, Friday, 3:30 is another time. Make sure you join us and enjoy your public holiday and have a good weekend.